In 1 John, the Apostle John reminds the church of this simple reality. Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. This is where the orthodoxy about the gospel welcoming all peoples gets fleshed out into orthopraxy, putting into practice all the things we know to be true. And our actions begin with our attitudes. When those living with a disability were asked, what is the greatest barrier keeping them from feeling welcomed and included in church? The greatest barrier was not accessibility or accommodations. Rather, it was the attitude of church members. The church, the body of Christ, is the place where those impacted by disability need to feel a part of a sacred community. Author and theologian Stanley Hauerwas writes that the church must be the place where those living with a disability feel welcomed, without apologizing, without being stared at, without being silently condemned. A few years ago, I was on a red-eye flight with a number of pastors on our way to a conference. Across the aisle was a young woman with her daughter who was maybe 4 or 5 years old. The daughter had clear intellectual disabilities and was extremely loud and out of control. Nothing the mother tried really seemed to calm her daughter, and she was a challenge to manage in tight quarters, crawling underneath the seats and out into the aisle. The other passengers on the plane could tell that this poor child had some significant disabilities and did their best to manage their own emotions. Most just subtly ignored, enduring the cacophony of whining, crying, and screaming, probably wishing this child wasn't on their flight, disrupting their sleep. I was exhausted myself and looking forward to sleep, but since I was in that family with a disabled child tribe, God gave me grace and empathy to reach out and begin a simple conversation with this mother. We chatted for nearly the whole duration of the 4+ hour flight. I didn't have any silver bullet to placate the child other than praying that God would give the dear child peace. When she found out that I was a Christian, she said that she too was a Christian. But sadly, the church community where she attended let her know through words or through merely ignoring her that she and her daughter were not welcome, or at least not wanted. I share all that to help show that our actions flow from our attitudes. How we think and feel towards those with disability will flesh out in the way we treat them. I pray that our churches are filled with saints whose attitude towards those living with disability is one of welcome and grace. In the midst of the disappointment that can come with disability, be willing to be silent and simply grieve with and be the presence of Christ. When you speak about someone with a disability, don't refer to them as that autistic boy or that Downs girl. Their identity is not their disability. A person's value and identity comes from being created and loved by God. Each one of us, regardless of ability or disability, is made in God's image and created with incredible beauty, dignity, and value. Be sincere and speak to each person with words of encouragement and hope that communicate value. Be willing to listen and share with honesty regarding the difficulties they face in living with a disability. Look for practical ways to help, perhaps in simple day-to-day tasks that may be hard for them to do or they may be unable to do. But first, ask if they want help. They may enjoy the challenge. In efforts to support a parent caring for a child with a disability or seeking to support an adult with a disability, look beyond the urgent needs and get to know the person and what they enjoy. As you get to know them, you'll begin to see how best to care for them and help them feel welcomed and included and needed. Creating systems of ongoing care will help your church take corporate action in order to create an effective Sunday buddy system. Provide quality training for the buddies, develop a sustainable pool of volunteers, and maintain ongoing care and support for the buddies so they themselves are being ministered to and don't burn out. Find those in your congregation who have a passion to serve those with special needs. Empower them with the time, money, space, and platform that they need to champion your church being a place where all are welcomed and needed. For those in your congregation who live with a disability, don't simply see them as a need, but as an asset. No one wants to be a project. Jean Vanier said, "The promise of Jesus is to help us discover that the poor are a source of life and not just objects of our charity." What gifts and talents has God given them to build up the body of Christ? Create space and context for those with disability to serve and share their giftings. Hasn't God chosen those who are weak in this world to be those who are rich in faith? A final way to take action is connect with those in your local community who are already engaged with those impacted by disability. Whether it be individuals or organizations already at work in your neighborhoods or cities, mobilize your church to help support those already doing the heavy lifting. Show your community that you love them by getting involved in serving. Again, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth.